Chevelle.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I take on board the comments that the last speaker has made. It is important that this matter be debated respectfully, and that is something that we owe the Royal Society, because as Pete Hodgson pointed out in his contribution, it is an august body. It's an ancient body. Not many institutions in New Zealand have lasted since 1867, when one considers that this Parliament was effectively only, with the exception of Judith Collins, that's true, but when one considers that this Parliament was really only constituted in 1865, that's the history of responsible democratic government in this country. One of the most respected institutions still in this nation only dates to 1865. Here we have the Royal Society, constituted in 1867 on a day yet to be revealed by the sponsor of the bill. Sir, one of the things I want to point out about the history of the Society, because I do think, having said that we owe the Society the courtesy of carrying this legislation through the House, we do also owe them the duty of thoroughly debating the legislation and ensuring that it is properly understood by members. And one of the points that hasn't yet been touched on in this debate is the fact that the Society found its origins in the fact that New Zealand was a difficult place to get around in the years after the Society was founded. Because in fact the Society was a federation of organisations. When it was put together in 1867, it wasn't called the Royal Society, it was called the New Zealand Institute. And there's an interesting parallel to reflect upon, given that we have in the present day another research-based, evidence-based organisation that conducts research in order to reach conclusions on the basis of the evidence that bears the name the New Zealand Institute. But that was the original name of the Royal Society when it was founded in 1867. And what it was founded to do was to coordinate the activities of different research organisations in the principal cities of New Zealand. There was the Auckland Institute, probably not in those days the premier scientific or research institute in the country, just because Auckland wasn't yet the major centre. There was the Wellington Philosophical Society, the Philosophical Institute of Canterbury, and the Otago Institute. And one of the problems that the country faced back in the latter part of the 19th century is that none of these individual research institutes had the resources to be able to coordinate their publication activity. They weren't able to afford to publish the research that they sponsored and undertook. And so what lay behind the impetus for the creation of the New Zealand Institute, later the Royal Society, was a desire to ensure that there would be one sponsoring body to ensure that the country could afford to collate and publish in one spot the scientific research that was being done in the new colony. And so the New Zealand Institute was set up to remedy the lack of existence of any such organisation, so that there could be published every year a single volume of transactions and proceedings on behalf of those institutions found in each of the major cities. So, sir, that probably, well, I hope that description of the federative nature of the early institute, later the Society, helps to explain a little bit of the background about what the House intends to do as far as the amendments to the Royal Society of New Zealand Act are concerned. But in terms of the provisions of Part 2 of the Preamble, as Alan Peachey said in his earlier contribution, the major thrust of this legislation is to allow the Royal Society of New Zealand to incorporate the discipline of humanities into its object and functions. There are some subsidiary parts of the legislation which are described in the preamble, Mr. Chairman.
I call the point of order the Honourable Member Joe Goodhue.
Mr. Chair, I want to alert you to an issue that has been brought to my attention. It seems that parliamentary television are telling the public that Charles Chauvel is talking on the VSM bill at the moment, and of course he's not. And if you could instruct them to correct the name of the bill on parliamentary TV, I'm sure that the contributions from the members would make a lot more sense.
Okay. Well, order on my feet. Can I just say, if that in fact is the case, I'm sure that it would have been heard, and I would hope that they would take notice of it. And thank you for drawing it to the House's attention. I call the Honourable Member Charles Chauvel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, when one considers the Clause 2A of the Preamble, and when one compares the current aims of the Royal Society of New Zealand, one can see why this legislation is necessary. The current aims of the Society, as set out in the 1997 legislation, are to foster in the New Zealand community a culture that supports science and technology, including the promotion of public awareness, knowledge and understanding of science and technology, and the advancement of science and technology education, but also to encourage, promote and recognise excellence in science and technology, to provide an infrastructure and other support for the professional needs and development of scientists and technologists, an echo of the original purpose of the Federation, the Institute, to provide expert advice on important public issues to the government and the community. And on that score, sir, I just want to recall that the Royal New Zealand Society was one of the first scientific bodies to have made a definitive statement on climate change in New Zealand. And on the 10th of July 2008, the Royal Society of New Zealand released a statement which said in summary, "The globe is warming because of increasing greenhouse gas emissions. Measurements show that greenhouse gas concentrations in the atmosphere are well above levels seen for many thousands of years. Further global climate changes are predicted, with impacts expected to become more costly as time progresses. Reducing future impacts of climate change will require substantial reductions of greenhouse gas emissions." So that was back in 1998, and it was evidence of the fulfilment of that very important third function of the Royal Society, which I've just described. And then there's the wrap-up provision as to its objects, to do all other lawful things which the Council considers conducive to the advancement and promotion of science and technology in New Zealand. Now, sir, the other thing that perhaps isn't realised about the Royal Society is that it's a federation of bodies. I think 41 bodies at the moment as things stand. And I could read out the names of the 41 constituent organisations because it would give the House a very accurate flavour of the preponderance of pure science influences on the Royal Society. But if one looks through the list of constituent organisations, one can see the importance of this bill and of the purposes set out in the preamble, particularly the one that was adverted to by Alan Peachey, the need to move humanities research into the organisation and to see that that can be done appropriately, because amongst the pure science bodies that are already members of the Society, you have the New Zealand Association for Research in Education. You have the New Zealand Institute for Economic Research. You have other non-pure science bodies, such as the Association of Social Anthropologists of Aotearoa, New Zealand, and the Population Association of New Zealand. So obviously it's the case already that non-pure pure science bodies have begun to seek and obtain membership of the Royal Society, and accordingly it's entirely appropriate that the bill should pass in its current form as reported back from the Select Committee, and that the preamble's description of what the bill attempts to do, in particular to broaden out the aims and objectives of the Society so as to incorporate these non-pure science organisations and to allow them to function lawfully and appropriately as members of the Royal Society, is an absolutely proper thing to see and for this House to be promoting. And as Grant Robertson said in his sterling introductory contribution to this debate, none of this can be achieved without legislation. It would be a terrible thing if we were to put the Royal Society in the position of operating ultra vires its legislation, and so, Sir, I do commend the preamble to the committee.